Take the recording. I'll start.
Well,
Great.
before that, everyone go with that?
Okay, now you have to enable screen sharing, I think. Can you do that?
Sorry, let you share your screen. Yes, I will do that. I believe I'll just make you co-host.
Because you don't want to look at my face this whole time, believe me. All right, there we go. Okay. Hold on, do I have the right screen here?
There we go.
Yeah, that looks like you, right? Okay.
That looks different now. we changed that.
Okay. That's good to know. Good to know. All right. So I'm Andrew Comrie-Picard, and thanks for the introduction, Quinn. This is can you see my cursor on the screen?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. This is a really good picture of the back of this guy's neck. As you can see, that's in focus. It's not really that good a picture of me. But that's good because it takes out my wrinkles. This is after winning the Baja 1000 in class 10. That's just who I am. I wanted to show you a picture of some of the kind of racing that I've done. My core type of racing is been rally racing. So this is Mitsubishi Evos. In this case, it's in the snow in upper Michigan, going to 80, 90, 100 miles an hour sideways in the snow. One of the things that I focused on a lot. I drove for Ford here in Ford Fiestas. This is in Missouri, combination of snow and gravel. All of these are, we built this car. This car was built by Ford. And then here, this is the X Games in California. I competed at 5 times. And only 4 of us actually competed in the first 5 X Games. Me, Ken Block, Travis Pastrana, and Tanner Faust. And so we were kind of the rat pack of racing that kind of stuff. This is the first big jump that anybody ever did with these kind of cars. And you wonder why I'm doing movie stunts now. It's because I was doing this kind of nonsense back then. This is Baja 1000 down in the desert. Obviously, this is a silt bed. You can see how deep and awful the circumstances are there. And you get all the silt coming in your mouth, and it's pretty gnarly. This is Pikes Peak. I'm going to show you some other photos from this later. This is actually a practice session, and that's going to be important later when we're talking. But this is for Toyota, for Scion. This is a car that had never been raced before. We had to build and do a race car. It's turbocharged, which you really need at this altitude. We've got to 14,000 feet. And then this is the Dodge Viper that I drove in the Formula Drift series. At this circumstance, we had 325 millimeter wide rear tires and 880 horsepower with a supercharger. It was quite a gnarly vehicle. Well, that's just some of the range of racing that I did over the years that I've done to give you an idea of my background. So now it's going to go to a really boring looking slide. The kind of things I want to talk to you about, and some of you guys asked some questions in the pre-meeting here about rationality paradoxes or heuristics. I didn't want to talk to you guys about mistakes you want to avoid. And after having been on so many race teams over so many years, and we've succeeded and we failed. We succeeded a little bit more than we failed, but we did both. I just want to make you guys aware of some of the ways it can go wrong so you can try to get out ahead of it and anticipate it. And one of the biggest things, and this is in thinking about your plans right now going forward. Are you familiar with the term heuristics? Heuristics are basically psychological habits that we fall into, right? The availability heuristic that, well, the last information I have is that overinflation of tires causes less traction. So it must always cause less traction. If it doesn't, in fact, the answer is it depends. But an availability heuristic will cause you to always say the same thing. Now, the heuristic I want to talk about is called bike shedding, which you can look up. It's just the term for this. Really what it means is there's a tendency to focus on easy and proximate details instead of big complex hurdles. So really, when you're workflow managing your build here or your whole challenge for the Formula SAE, you should do as much as you can to bite off the hard big things first, right? And hard big things will come up along the way. But if you identify what the monster critical path things are, there's 1,000 details you're going to have to worry about. But don't put off the really big hard stuff. And there's a real tendency to do that, especially if you're working Wednesdays from 5 to 8. like, well, you know, maybe we could weld this thing together, or maybe we could design the upper A arm, you know, over the next few weeks or whatever. But if you haven't figured out how you're going to manage the throttle, or modulate the turbo, or you know, those are probably bigger things. The upper arm is probably going to work even if you made it out of wood. If you can't articulate the throttle, the cars are going to run. So not wanting to make too fine a point of it, focus on the big operational things. And to that end, I'd recommend you try to get the car iterated. Like, you know, plenty of times we showed up on the day of the race with the car with the paint still wet, right? But the really good way to do it is to have it ready weeks ahead of time, and then test and refine and rebuild and refocus. I can't stress testing enough. Once I got on professional teams, I started as an amateur. I built all my own cars. I welded all the stuff together, I designed and everything. By the time I was on factory teams, though, the factory teams didn't consider themselves ready unless they were ready 3 weeks early and out testing, and then breaking it and rebuilding it and breaking it and figuring it out and changing the alignment, trying different tires, right? Because the build is only the groundwork. After that, you have to do the racecraft stuff. And so I can't emphasize to you strongly enough, get ready early. Set yourself a really artificial deadline. Say that the car has to be finished and testing in February. When you're in California, you can do that. The guys in Michigan can't, so you have an advantage over them. All right, so, but to this, you know, identify the critical factors. And look, I just downloaded the Formula SA rules today. And I've never done it. I don't know anything about it, but I know a fair amount about racing. And I don't know exactly how you deal with the driver selection, but know that that's going to be important. You know, I looked at the different tests you have, and obviously driving is going to be important. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody who's already an expert driver, but it has to be somebody who's committed to being able to test and to improve, and or whoever the four of them, I think you have to select four. They all have to be committed to really making the best out of it that they can. And there's a lot of factors to that we're going to talk about in a second. And I'm going to go through all these individually too. Knowledge of event. I know that Formula SAE, has any of you ever done Formula SAE before? Previously, can you put up your hand? New for everybody. Okay.
Just to let you know, so we've only competed in the knowledge event, which was online. So yes, but no, we've never been in person. So
okay. So there's a bunch. I'm going to suggest that the next most important speaker that you get after me is somebody who's gone and done it, because there are going to be circumstances on the day. You know, you can read the rules. I read the rule. You've got, I think, a 22 kilometer or something endurance test. You got an autocross. You got a straight line test. You got a skid pad. You want to know what's about to happen, right? Because you're preparing for those things, and you want to test those things. Don't take out the car and, like, you know, just kind of run around the parking lot. Go set up those exact courses, right? Go and put out pylons for exactly that skid. You're smiling, I don't know, but go set up the actual skid pad. Go set up the drag race. You know, you're not going to be able to set up the full endurance event, I guess. But as much as possible, know what you're getting into, study it, try to get people who've been there, talk to them, try to download whatever knowledge possible, because there's no point just making a beautiful car. You want to go win this damn thing, right? And if you're going to win the thing, you got to know what you're doing. So whatever you can do to get more knowledge of the event. I'm going to give you some examples later. I'm a big tire nerd. All racers become massive tire nerds. So big that I started a tire company. Tires, they're the type of tire, the temperature you run it at, the pressure you run it at, the weight of the car that determines what pressure you should run it at, the alignment, which determines how the tire hits the road and how the temperature develops across the surface of the tire. These are all critical factors that make or break races for everybody, right? And so, and basically every racer becomes a huge tire nerd, because it doesn't matter how good your brakes are, how much power you have, what your driver's like. You only get 4 contact patches about the size of the palm of your hand, and yours is even smaller. It's like the middle part of the palm of your hand to hold onto the road with. And none of your suspension or your tuning or your brakes or anything matters if you're not working the tires right, okay? So I want you to nerd out about tires. And we're going to talk about that in a second too, okay? Weight. I was astonished to read the rules. It doesn't look like there's a minimum weight, right? Nor is there a calculated weight with driver, is there? Okay, we'll figure that out. I'm afraid that means that you have to have drivers with limbs cut off or that haven't eaten for 6 weeks. Okay, but it does mean that the weight matters, man, for everything, for the drag race, for the slalom, for the course. So you should select drivers that are going to be great for what they're doing, but you also want small drivers. I hate to tell you. And you want the whole thing to be as light as possible, because there's no rule about that. I'm surprised. I would have thought they would have had a minimum weight with drivers so that it equalizes out. But be aware that if you're up against a team of 4 midgets, you're in a bad place. Okay, small people are called now. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be programming you incorrectly. Okay, reliability and serviceability. Teams always forget about this stuff when you're building race cars, right? And you can build the most beautiful thing. But if something isn't replaceable, if somehow there's some, I don't know, the clutch or I guess you have a clutch on your bike, it's a bike motor. If you can't replace that because of the way that you've mounted the motor in the frame, and you get to the race and suddenly the clutch is somehow not working correctly, well, you're boned. I mean, then you have to take the engine out to replace the clutch, right? So consider, as you're designing it, serviceability. Reliability kind of speaks to itself. Don't make you're all smart enough, both as engineers and as kind of hopefully shade tree mechanics, to know what the weak link in any chain is going to be. Don't be afraid of it. Don't look away from it and say, whoa, that Heim joint is pretty sketchy, but we'll just go with it anyway, right? Because if it breaks and it keeps breaking, you're out of the competition, right? So focus on the reliability part. You should make the thing as bulletproof as you can. And again, to that point, try to complete it 2 months early and start running it into walls or something, and then see if it stands up. Am I making sense? Can you guys wave? Am I making sense? Okay, good. And then adjustability, which is to say, even though I want you to learn everything about the event and know what you're getting into, you're not going to know absolutely everything until you're there. Learn everything you can, but the temperature, the surface of the track, all kinds of stuff, you're going to want to be able to adjust the car to adapt to those things. Okay, is that all making sense?
Yeah.
Any questions so far?
The Heim joint thing hit close to home.
Yeah. Okay, good. So I'm preaching to the choir here. That's good. Okay, let's go into a fancier photo. So driver, selection, confidence, and fitness. I chose this photo, and I just went through some old Facebook photos and plucked some stuff out, okay? The driver selection we already talked about. It may be a combination of weight, skill, trainability, all those things. You're going to have to figure that out. Fitness, I chose this photo too because I look relatively slim here. I'm not a naturally slim person. But in rally racing, you can see it's at night, it's steamy. This is some disaster event. I can't even remember which one. But you can see I'm sweating already. We've gotten out of the car. It takes a lot of physical fitness. Now you're doing short events, but you can't afford not to be fit. So I think your drivers should be working out if they're not already. And confidence, this is extremely important. It's going to be tough because there's going to be some of you guys who can't drive because of the nature of the rules. There's not enough seats for the people in the room there. This here is my co-driver. I had a number of co-drivers over the year, a couple of great co-drivers. But you can see he's looking at me, right? He gets in the car with me. I don't know if you know how rally racing works. There's 2 people in a car. You go out in the forest. We've made a set of notes about the road that I've dictated about all the character of the turns and things. I should have showed you some videos here, but if you know what rally racing is, basically he's calling out left 5, 30, mid right over crest, stay right, these things so that I can drive ahead of my eyes. But more than that, he's also kind of my psychologist, right? And he's looking at me now and thinking, where's ACP at? Like he's sweaty. He's like, maybe we're down in 3rd place. We got to fight harder. And so he has to modulate his voice to be able to get the most out of me. Okay. I'm a pretty smart guy. I'm pretty experienced, but I'm still going to react to the way he's behaving. And so I want you guys to understand that your confidence in your drivers is extremely important too. We were once competing for a championship, and my co-driver and I, we were lining up to the start of a stage. My co-driver, literally a person putting his life in my hands, going 100 miles an hour along the edge of a cliff. And he turned to me and said, "All right, use your voodoo, man. You're the guy for this." I was like, "You're right. I am the guy for this. I'm going to use my voodoo." And we won the stage, we won the race, we won the championship, right? Not because of that one thing, but in part because of his invested confidence in me. So when you get to your drivers, you got to support them, right? And drivers, you got to suck that up, okay? All right, enough about drivers. Any questions?
Nope, all good.
All right, knowledge of event. We talked about this already. You got to learn as much as you possibly can. This is a rally race in northern Michigan. This is a car that I drove from Mitsubishi. I built it, or our team built it. And you can see it's snowy. It's cold. We knew that already, right? But you can see some other stuff here. Can you see this down here? This like polished ice, right? So we would go out. We're not allowed to go out on the roads in the days ahead, but we get all the possible data we can about with a freezing cycle and how much snow is going to be on the surface. And we would take up to 60 different tires of like 5 different kinds in order to have just the right tire. And we were allowed, you're not allowed to, I looked at your rules, you're not allowed to cut grooves in the tires and things, but we would pre-cut the tires, we tractionize them, we do everything right, and have every possible option at our disposal that we could afford or figure out. However, even past that, if you look really carefully here, you may think that I'm talking woo-woo here, but this is true. You see how this tire is biting into the snow there, and this tire is biting into the snow here, and this tire is biting into the snow over here? When you really know what you're doing, and this is a top 5 type thing. I think we either won this race or we were right at the top of it. We chose, you can't quite see it here. Maybe, I don't know if you can see it in your screen, but there's little chunks in this tire here. This is a very chunky tire. This is actually a snow tire, right? It's not an ice tire. If I put on ice tires, I'd have the car over about another foot in trying to run on these grooves the guys have polished off first, because ice tires don't work well on snow. But I've got snow tires on. So I'm driving it on the snow ridges, right? That's a knowledge of event thing and a knowledge of how to use your equipment, right? That's the kind of thing that sets the really fast teams apart from the other guys. So knowledge of the event, know what you're doing. I mentioned tires, you know, this is that picture that we looked at. This is actually, this corner I'm showing you now is the corner after this one. So this is called the W's at Pikes Peak. You go around here, and then it's a 12-mile course, but it's you remember every bit of it. This next corner is right here, and on race day it rained. See, not only rained, but it's cold as hell, and we're on pure slick tires. Yeah, which is sketchy as hell, right? But you can see we're going fast enough. I'm lifting the inside rear wheel, right? That's because of a few things. For one, it was raining and there wasn't a rain tire option for us. The rain actually hit halfway up the hill, but I had pre-sliced it with a box cutter. I put little slots in the tires to make little, we call them sipes. They're like little fingernails to help dig in to the surface. And that also helped get the tires up to temperature, okay? Because what happens here, I mean, we're now at like about 10,000 feet of altitude, and it's cold and rainy on the surface. And I've got not just our compound tires, if you know what that is, these are full-blown race tires, race slicks, right? They have to be hot to work. And we had to manage the hardest thing actually we ever had at Pikes Peak was managing the tire temperatures. They were always too cold. And I worry it's a problem that you guys could have. I asked Clean earlier to send me over some specs about your tires. And in looking at what you're planning to use, I know there's a rain option and a dry option. But I think one of the hardest things you're going to have is getting heat into those tires. You're not allowed to have tire warmers, right, on the team. But I didn't see any rule that you can't paint the wheels black and leave them out in the sun, right? Or you can't heat the air, like leave them deflated and then put hot air in them at the last second, or all kinds of crazy things. We've taken all the wheels off the car and put them in a heated SUV with the heat on full blast for an hour before going racing. That's not a tire warmer. It's taking the tire off the car and putting it in a hot car. Okay. Now you may run into some interesting scrutineers with what they say about that, but it's not in the rules. It's not cheating yet. I'd encourage you to investigate the limits of that. Okay. Because the problem is for the autocross and for the skid pad, from what I can see, I don't think you're gonna have time to get that car up to temperature. I think that I think you might want to play some kind of game. And again, look at the rules. I just downloaded them today. You get 4 runs, I think, in the autocross. I suspect your best run is going to be your last run when everything's hot. And so you may get to choose how quickly you get to put those runs together. I think you have to switch drivers, 2 drivers for 2 runs and 2 drivers for 2 runs, or 1 driver for another 2 runs, right? I think you may find that you need those previous runs to get the tires hot enough to work, right? You're dealing with a very light car on a very short course, right? It may be that your early runs are just throwaways to get them hot. And then the money runs at the end. right? Don't be stupid on the previous runs, but maybe you want to strategize and say, you could even strategize and say, well, maybe we're not actually going to go for performance on the first run. Maybe we're going to run a wide loop, or we're going to like swerve around the loop to try to heat up the tires. You go figure that out, okay? That's worth figuring out, because if those tires aren't up to temperature, they're like hockey pucks. You'll skid off the track, okay? And if some other team hasn't thought of that, they're just going to skid off the track and you're going to laugh at them like a bunch of winners, okay? Okay, winners don't laugh at losers. Don't take the wrong program. Sort. Okay, so weight, reliability, serviceability, knowledge of rules. This is a picture combining everything. So this is in an area called the Park Expose. This is at the beginning of a rally race. In fact, it's the second day of a multi-day rally race. But it's a display where you can see the sort of spectators and fans and stuff get to walk and look around the cars, right? And we had a ridiculously unpredictable failure of a starter failure. It's not the kind of thing you'd anticipate, right? But it's the kind of thing you have to be ready for. So, for example, you can see the other rally cars are parked along here. We're all ready to go out and go racing. And rallying is, I don't know if you know, but it's kind of, it happens on public roads that are closed down. You transit on, you go from the base on normal public roads, and the cars spit fire and have plastic windows. They shouldn't really be on the road, but we nominally have them street registered, and we drive out to the rally stages, and then we go as fast as possible. But they're based on street cars, right? And so we had this problem with the starter failing. So first off, weight. For example, you might not notice this, but the car has a full underbody skid plate, but it's made of carbon Kevlar because you don't want any extra weight, right? Thing one. Thing two, reliability. Well, we should have probably replaced the starter before the event, but we didn't. I mean, there was nothing to indicate it was going to go off, but it finally did. It was a high compression motor, probably not surprising. However, serviceability, parts, proximity, there's a spare starter that we had in our truck that's parked right around the corner there because we already studied this street and we knew that if we had a problem, we'd need to have all the parts as close as possible, okay? So the guys were able to go just around the corner and get the starter. Knowledge of rules, other people said, wait, you can't work on your car in Park Expose. We said, oh no, you can, here's the rules. And people said, oh, I guess you can. And so we worked on it, right? And then the serviceability, in fact, the Mitsubishi Evo is a diabolical car to work on. But over the years, we learned some things by shortening certain engine mount bolts. We actually left one bolt off the transfer case always, that prevented it from getting changed in the field. You learn little things like how to make it easier to get the starter out, right? So we swapped out that starter in 10 minutes on a public street with axle stands and a starter that we had hidden in a truck right around the corner. And that we ended up winning the North American Rally Championship this year, in part because of the points I got at this race. Okay, so I want you to focus on the big issues, but don't ignore these. You know, maybe it's the Heim joint, maybe it's whatever. But think about serviceability. Think about how you're going to maintain the rig. Okay, make sense?
Yeah. Moving on.
Adjustability and knowing when to use it. This is a car, again, this is a Scion XD that was never a rally car before. We turbocharged it, made it ridiculous. And we put in tying suspension, lots of fancy stuff. But we made it so that it was fairly easy serviceable for alignment. So this is a front wheel drive car. Very, very hard to get the power down. We had lots of power. It was really hard to get it to the road. So we knew that would be a lot in being able to adjust alignment and also to adjust sway bars. Because counterintuitively, you would think you'd want a lot of roll stiffness, or you wouldn't want a lot of roll stiffness in the front of a front wheel drive car, right? Car rolls over, you don't want to lift the inside wheel to start it spinning. You think you'd want it to be able to droop down. And you guys know what a sway bar or roll bar is, right? So yeah, so you would think you wouldn't want a lot of sway bar, but the truth is actually, you really want a pretty stiff front part of the car. To go back, this wheel is lifting here. It's a non-driven wheel. It's just along for the ride because the roll stiffness is very stiff across the front of the car, okay? We're trying not to roll it. And that means that we're trying not to let this wheel go up in the wheel well so that this wheel doesn't come off the ground. A little counterintuitive. But anyway, the point there is that he's here adjusting the sway bar, right? And we made it adjustable in the field so that we could test it and change that. So build for adjustability. Now, I have a picture of your car or something of your car. I don't see any adjustability here. Now, maybe you've changed that, but maybe it's adjustable out here that I can't see. but you can't, if you want to adjust the camber, which is the length of this arm versus the length of this arm, right? Have you changed that? Can you adjust that now?
Yes, we can. The heim joints can rotate out and thread out.
Okay. Okay. I'm not going to get into the particulars of your car right now, but you're going to want to adjust that. And can anybody tell me, I'll be the Socratic professor now. Can anybody tell me why you might want to adjust that?
Yeah, speak up.
We're doing a lot of turning in corners, and the car rolls in the corners. So whenever you roll, you want the tire to be flat. That's why you need negative camber to count for that. Whenever the body rolls, you want the tire to be flat from that same direction. So you need to adjust the camber so that perfectly works out where the tire's flat when the car's in corners.
I think you got it there. I didn't hear every word, but basically you're right. As the car rolls over, you want to keep the tread surface flat on the ground. But I'm going to tell you, we don't have a lot of time. I'm going to tell you how you determine that. You're going to go and test, and you're going to take pyrometer readings across the width of the tire. You're going to make sure that it's getting equally hot across the width of the tire, right? If it's too cool on the outside edge, you're going to want to dial out camber. You're going to want the tire to be more upright. If it's too cool on the inside edge, you're going to want to dial in more camber because you're trying to work the whole surface of the tire. And it's the temperature that's going to tell you, okay? Now, you have the theory correct. As the body of the car rolls, you're going to want to keep the tire in its best possible contact patch. But the truth is that's not necessarily vertical because the tire is going to squirm out from under the rim also. Your best indicator is going to be the temperature of the tire across its width, okay? To get a good digital pyrometer, you're going to take the temperatures, right? Excellent.
Will do.
Okay, and so here's kind of the culmination of all this stuff in one. This is about driver confidence. This is about serviceability. This is about all kinds of stuff. So this is a Mitsubishi Evo 9. We built, a sponsor insisted we do it. You can see that I'm a little frustrated. What you might not believe is how incredibly tired I am. I haven't slept for 5 days there, and literally have not slept. I don't know. I couldn't do it again. But we were on an incredible burn to finish the car. I don't recommend it. I'm telling you to finish your car 2 months ahead of time, right? But in this case, there were circumstances with the sponsor and the car arriving late and all kinds of stuff. We had to make it work. And then we had a problem with the turbocharger had a pinhole leak and it kept slicing rubber air intake hoses above it. And so we had to, you can see it's smoking. This is in a 20-minute service. We come in for 20 minutes. Practically 18 because you have to drive in from the checkpoint, drive back out. And you can see we already have the bumper off, that carbon fiber skid plate, or the carbon Kevlar skid plates off. The guys are working like mad to replace that hose. And I'll tell you later about how we finally fixed it or fixed it in the field. But here I'm incredibly fatigued. I have to not get frustrated, right? He again is looking at me, trying to figure out how am I going to manage his emotions so that he is able to give the maximum the whole time. These guys are scalding their hands. We actually used to have Nomex sleeves that they pull over these outfits. Oh, this guy works for Roush now, actually. And they're trying to figure out how to change this molten hot stuff right in the field. So that's paying attention to serviceability. And we actually went out and we finished second in this race after this. Like we fixed it, right? But only because of a combination of me trying to keep my cool, him managing me, these guys having Nomex sleeves on. And knowing what to do here, right? It takes a combination of everything, and it takes the whole team. You guys are all in this together. We'll get to that a little bit later. Okay, and this is related to that too. Who's heard of Occam's razor? It's an old psychological thing, but basically the bottom line of it is that you want to make things that the simple solution is usually the best solution. Don't make things more complicated than they have to be, right? And sometimes I have a picture of one of our favorite tools in the trailer, which is a sledgehammer. Sometimes you just got to hit the damn thing, right? Somebody's got to bend it back. Sometimes it's not always the most technical solution. So I'm going to tell you a little story about Inconel versus soup. So this guy actually, an engineer from Mitsubishi, nice, great guy. He's still there actually. But he was fairly new on the team then. And this turbocharger was slicing that hose all the time from this pinhole leak. Well, we didn't have time in any of these services to disassemble the molten hot turbo assembly and replace it with another one, although we had one, but we didn't have enough time to do that. And in this service, it might have been even at this service, this guy was saying, well, what that really needs is a heat shield, and that temperature and pressure, it's going to have to be made out of Inconel or something. And like, you know, the needle scratches off the record and like, what? Like how that's, in theory, you're right? Like that is true, that for what this is putting out, only something of that durability is going to be able to solve the problem. But we didn't have that kind of time. We didn't have any Inconel anyway. We did have some Inconel in the car, but not that we could repurpose or something. And this guy, who actually now works for Roush, at the next service, this is a huge toter home. Actually, we used to have a stacker trailer, like 81 feet long, 80,000 pounds, ridiculousness. My then girlfriend was in making lunch for everybody, and he ran in and said, "What are we having for lunch?" And she said, "I don't know." And he started looking through the cupboards and picked up a can of tomatoes and said, "We're having tomato pasta or something." And he opened up the tomato can and dumped out all the tomatoes and ran back out. And by taking out both the lid and the bottom of that and slicing it, used that as a sheath around the turbocharger, okay? With mechanics wire holding on around the back, right? And that goddamn tin got us through the race and we finished second overall, okay? So that's sometimes the simplest solution is the only solution. And sometimes it's the sledgehammer, sometimes it's the soup can, okay? But don't be afraid of thinking outside the box. Don't put your engineer hat on too hard. You know what I'm saying? Okay, let's move on. We only have a few minutes anyway. Psychology of winning. This goes for everybody, not just the drivers. It goes for everybody on the team. You're all in this together, okay? We're going to talk about visualizing briefly. We're going to talk about your relationship with perfection, and we're going to talk about starting early. Again, I want you to get that car out there, okay? Visualizing. This is, I chose this picture. I've got lots of podium pictures, but this is at the end of the Baja 1000, I think in 2013. I won it a couple of times. That's me. But you can see it's a big team, right? This guy's actually the money. This is the guy from Michelin, BF Goodrich, who sponsored everything. And this guy's been doing it for, I think, 45 years, and she runs the whole marketing. But we were the race team. I want you to start right now imagining yourselves with the trophy in hand, right? I want you to think of yourselves as the guys who can take this whole thing, and girls, all right? And don't put your head down. Bring your head back up. You're going to win this thing. Don't be shy, okay? Because I'm trying to put you in the racecraft mindset, okay? And it's not, look, winning and losing, frankly, are all the same at the end of the day. You maybe get a plaque to take home or something or whatever. It doesn't matter in a sense. On the other hand, why finish last, right? Like, why wouldn't you go try to win? And my goal is to get you to be the most successful team out there, all right? So don't just think it'd be nice. Believe it's going to happen, all right? Now, I've talked to you a lot about all the things you should do and how you should do everything right, and you'll make 1,000 mistakes along the way, and that's okay. But I want you to work for perfection, and then as it all goes down, you're going to have to abandon perfection. So this is an interesting shot for a bunch of reasons for me. This is, again, a snow rally in northern Michigan. This is my first race officially with Ford. And this is a Fiesta R2. It's prepared in England, actually. It's a special car, pure rally car, sequential 6-speed transmission, extremely high-strung car. Only really works above 5,000 RPM, 5,000, 7,000 RPM. You have to be very aggressive driving it. And unfortunately, M Sport, who built it in England, had never done a rally like we do in North America on snow without studs. So the car was woefully badly prepared. It was much too stiff. The engine was the whole map was much too aggressive. The whole thing was a disaster. And it's one of the worst driving cars I've ever driven. And you can see here, and I'm not blaming this all on the car, this is on me too, but I'm way offline. I'm like, car width's too wide here. I should be way in here. I've already ripped off the front bumper. I hit the snowbank already. It's a hot mess, this whole thing. It's a total disaster. I mean, it looks kind of cool as a picture, but everything about it is wrong, okay? But we knew it going in. We knew the car wasn't sprung correctly. I tried I got softer springs. We did everything we possibly could, but it was just the circumstances. Ford wanted us to run this car. It was prepared in England. We didn't run on the surface. And then we just had to suck it up and work with what we had, right? And that's true a lot of times in rally. We run that a lot of times. So I didn't win this race. I didn't win the race, but I did salvage third place, okay? And with those points, we won the championship. If I hadn't finished third, if we'd given up, if I just banked it, if I hadn't tried to get everything out of it, we wouldn't have won the championship. This is only the first race in the series. It's a snow race, happens in January up in Michigan. We won the series by mid-July, with 2 races left, but we needed this one to do it, right? So work for perfection, but then abandon it. Okay, and then I'm gonna show you a really embarrassing photo. So I don't know if any of you are into RC car racing, remote control car racing. As a kid, I was really into it. So this is the US Nationals in 1986. I'm dating myself now. And this is the elite of RC car racing of the day. This guy's named Kent Clausen. This guy's Tony Neisinger, Mike Lavico. These guys all won world championships. I was on the same team with them. This is me. You can see, as I said, I'm not a naturally skinny guy. I got skinny later from my racing. I'm only 15 years old here. These guys are all in their 20s and 30s. But I got into RC car racing, and I learned, and I've said this before in interviews, I think I learned 80% of what I ever learned about racing cars by racing remote control cars, right? How to deal with my own head, how to work the organ in here in order to stay focused and do well, how to work with all these other guys, how to be both their friends and their competitor, their rival, right? How to work with sponsors. I was on the same world championship team as these world champions right here, but how to deal with that sponsor and how to get the best out of them. It makes a difference. And I know you guys are still young. You're in your teens or 20s now. That's great. You're starting now. And maybe you want to go on to professional racing careers or professional engineering careers, and you should consider that. But the earlier you do something, I recommend Malcolm Gladwell's theories about 10,000 hours. By the time I got here, I was lucky enough, my dad, we had a garage at our house, and he happened to put down ozite carpet in it, which is what we all usually raced RC cars on. And I would go to that garage every day, and I just ran RC cars around, just ran them around. By the time I showed up at this race, I'd done 10,000 hours of running little RC cars around, right? And so by the time I got to the race was over, right? I'd already, I didn't win this race, but I was in the top 10 in the country, just because I was in my little garage in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, nowhere, running RC cars around, just running around. Okay, I got to get off that picture. It's too embarrassing. These are cooler pictures. If you succeed, you get girls or guys, or this is me presenting at the SEMA Awards, the Best of Show. This is Sang Kang, Sung Kang, from Fast and Furious. This is winning a race. You get to drink champagne. That comes with it too. And then you get to do movie stunts. This is actually for Top Gear. I got to drive I did stunts for Top Gear for about 5 years, and a lot of movie stunts, Fast and Furious, and what else of it? Atomic Blonde. I did all the cars on that and stuff like that. This guy's a real bullfighter, and we did a scene for Top Gear where I kept driving through, and he kept bullfighting the Lamborghini that I was driving, sliding it around in this bull ring, and I made like 8 or 10 passes, and he would step right. I would go right under his cape. He would get the cape all the way across the windshield as I passed underneath it, going by him at 60 miles an hour after doing a big dirty drift around here. And at the end, he said, "It's been a great pleasure. You're a true professional." And I said, "You're a bullfighter, man. I mean, like, come on." But this is what I got to eventually. I'm putting my contact details here. Consider me a resource going forward. Okay. Feel free to reach out to me. You can either do it through Quinn or just use this data here. I'm a big fan of projects like this. I think that you're going to learn a lot. I know you're going to succeed because you got friends like me on board, and you got your own wits about you. But have fun with it. Make sure you focus. Finish the car early, and be aware of heuristics, mistakes that you can make along the way. And it sounds like you already have a Heim joint to learn from. Okay. Any questions? I'm going to put on my headphones. Hold on.
Any questions?
Okay, all right, let's go.
I have a question for you, so I'll go first. So
Sorry, I'm gonna suggest for questions, can you say it to whoever's sitting really close to the mic there who can repeat it?
Yeah, you just come up here. Here, you know what? You
Okay.
take a seat. And you get the top. Go ahead.
So when you're designing a car, what is the first piece you design? Like, where do you start if you're starting from scratch?
The rule book, always the rule book. You're always, it's horses for courses. And you can see I raced a lot of different series. Every car was uniquely different and it was built to optimize to the rules. Now, in thinking about your circumstances there of building a vehicle from scratch, I would do a combination of, and I know you already have something in process, but I would do a combination of looking both at the rule book and if there's any way, I don't know if there is, if there's any way to see which designs have been successful before, whether or not that means there's a lot of aero, whether that means that there's something quirky about it, or whether there's something about the design that seemed to be genius to it. You know, there are some basic principles. You know, who's heard of Colin Chapman? Oh, okay. Colin Chapman was the boss of Lotus, and his.
If you can still hear us, you're frozen. So. All right, so give us a second. What's going on with this?
All nodes to the set.
Some technical difficulties,
Yeah. Okay, we're back. We're back. We're good.
Can we hear you?
We're good.
Can we hear you?
My speaker's down.
You good? Got me?
we don't have
So-
audio.
Can you hear me now?
Not
Coming
yet.
out.
It's on
It's
our
just
side.
lagging. It's like it killed itself.
Oh boy, it's really, yeah. It's
Yeah.
Well, you can answer it on here.
Yeah, just turn it up.
Yep, this is as high as you can go. All right, go for it, Andrew.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So, you know, Colin Chapman's engineering principle was added lightness. Like his cars were probably dangerous. They were so light. In fact, drivers complained that they were dangerous. You want to absolutely go out to the edge of the rules. So I can't answer that question for you. I'm going to say that if you've already decided on the power plant and I think you have a 710 cc limit, presumably you're as close to that as you can. Your architecture is basically sorted out. You know, if it were a blank slate, I'd be asking questions like, should it be 4-wheel drive, or should you consider a different engine layout? But I think you're already at a viscous rear diff with a rear, a mid-engine, good formula. I like it. I think now you're getting to refining details. But so that's not a really good answer question. Really, the first step is always the rule.
All right.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
Any other questions? Who's next?
Hold on, let's try. Okay. All right. Let's go off the laptop for now.
All right, so Zach, yeah, one more question, or another question.
So
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard earlier, but I was the one that proposed doing another hybrid class car. And so thinking about that, what is the true benefit or disadvantage one way or the other going actual versus having like a rear?
Oh boy, I think we lost your audio here. We can't hear you.
We're all engineers, not
Try
CS students.
Let me try connecting through phone.
Oh yes, talk again. No, I can't. Hey, mute yours. Okay.
He's gonna leave me.
Hey, mute yours over there.
What is this?
Yeah. Okay, admit. I just said, come on, baby. Ah!
Just go to participants and do it. Yeah, just go to participants.